Do you
When,
experience, sorry,
go ahead.
we hear stories in this all the time how deviant our government is, more deviant than the average American would ever dream. With coming out public and writing a book, did you fear or receive any backlash from the government?
What happened to my husband and I was intensely partisan in nature. It shouldn't have been. I mean, it was an issue of national security. Why would a covert CIA operative's identity be betrayed by her own government, if not for narrow partisan gain? Having said that, then, it sort of became a years-long story that waxed and waned. There were all different pieces to it. But specifically, there were a couple incidents that were disturbing. One was that in 2004, I learned that I was the target of an Al-Qaeda a credible threat. And ironically enough, the other ones on the threat that were also being threatened by the same Al-Qaeda piece was John Ashcroft, George Tenet, and Karl Rove. So I went to the head of CIA security and asked for them to consider putting security on my home, on my residence. That's where, of course, I would be the most vulnerable. And at the time, I had very small children. They were 4-year-old twins. And so whatever happened to me. But, if anything were to happen to my children, I would never forgive myself. So they looked into it and they got back to me and they said, no, we're not going to do that. And it really felt like a betrayal all over again, especially because the other 3 targets already enjoyed 24/7 protection. They could go to their son's basketball game and do this and do that. So that was disheartening, to say the least. And I think it was the next year, my husband and I, our taxes were audited, which is so funny, because, it was like shades of Nixon's enemies list. It's like, really? Really? There was no red flags that anyone, we had an accountant do our taxes. I was a government employee. My husband at that time had retired. it was like, not quite, but, a Form 1040 EZ. And it was, I can't help but wonder, and there were other things, but you have to, when you're bullied, you have to push back. And that's what they were. They were political bullies.
At that time, I guess when you were outed, I don't know if that's the correct term, were you fearful, for your life? And are you still, look over your shoulder, I guess?
Well, for a while there, because, particularly with the Al-Qaeda threat, I was like the CIA poster girl. And if they wanted just to, and that was uncomfortable. But I was more, frankly, just angry that the CIA, for whom I loved and I had served loyally and I had served well, declined to provide. I wasn't asking for lifelong Secret Service protection. It was really just from the beginning of 2004 through the presidential election, because I knew that would stir up the most. So we moved in 2007. Our family moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and that's where we are now. So we're aware of our security situation, but I'm not, I don't live in fear. Sure. I'm not bitter. I'm not angry. There's always crazy people, and you just kind of keep that in mind.
Can you travel internationally?
Mm-hmm. I can, and I do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm always a little concerned at the immigration line, but no, so far it has not. I've only gone to Europe, so it's not like it's been, really far flung.
Do you think Hillary's going to run?
The question of the hour, isn't it? Yeah, who knows? She
you
must be
spoke highly of her.
exhausted. Yeah, I did. She really has proven herself as a workhorse in both the Senate and then as Secretary of State. I love her lifelong focus, but even as Secretary of State, I love that her focus was on women. and educational and economic opportunities. Because why has it taken us so long to figure out that the real trouble spots in the world are places where women routinely face violence and lack of educational opportunities? I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that all the trouble spots in the world
East
are
Africa.
places. Exactly, Afghanistan, Pakistan. There's many, but the the really difficult places in the world are where women have very limited access to educational, economic opportunities. Numerous studies now over the last decade have shown, hey, wait a minute, when we don't ignore half of our population, we all seem to do better. What do you know? And where you provide that economic, ultimately political freedom, you have a society that is willing to enter into the community of nations in a way that is more positive than negative. So whether John Kerry wakes up every morning and thinks about these issues, I don't think so. He's got a lot, he'll be good, and he has a lot of other things on his mind, but that doesn't answer the question. I have no idea if she was run, really, but she's making noises, and in fact, I'm reading right now Game Change. Am I like the last person to read the Game Change? But it's fascinating. It's the story of the 2008 primaries, and they made a movie out of it with Julianne Moore. But it's fascinating how that political sausage is made.
Confident with Obama's administration as compared to Bush?
What's the question?
Yeah, he's done a lot of, obviously, I think we would have been out of Iraq anyway had Bush stayed there, but, he got us, we're out now, Afghanistan. We've got a local unit here in Wisconsin who's over there now, National Guard, and, what happens if we pull out? You were talking about the, women who are enjoying, from what I'm reading, some freedom there in Afghanistan, but Taliban avowed.
Obama ran an incredible campaign. A lot of the rhetoric was, rightly so, focused on the failures of the Bush administration and the incredible accumulation of power within the executive. I don't think he ever quite said this, but he intimated that once he was in power, he would sort of restore a more co-equal balance of the branches of government. Well, of course, you get into power, you go, oh, really? I can do all this? And they haven't exactly handed back chunks of power. And in many ways, it's been pointed out, the Obama administration is in many ways a continuation of many of the policies under Bush. Turns out it's really hard, apparently, to close Guantanamo, which continues to be a huge thorn in the reputation of the United States. Drone attacks have increased, whatever. So power is never given back. In very rare instances. So that is why you have to continue to be vigilant as citizens in a democracy, hold your government to account for their words and deeds. It is extremely difficult to, I think the president is ascribed much more power than he actually has to make, he's got a great bully pulpit, and that's probably his most potent weapon. But despite what they said during the last campaign, he does not have control over gas prices. And apparently he cannot, even though I'm sure personally wants to close Guantanamo. There are so many other forces and things at play that he does not have control over. Of course, I'm delighted that we've we've pulled out of Iraq, drawing down in Afghanistan. I think Americans are sick and tired of war, and we realize we have so many issues here that we need to take care of. But I just did a panel at a conference on world affairs, and those that are much more knowledgeable about this than I, and serve much more on the periphery, if you will, of the administration, spoke quite harshly of the sort of the bureaucratic mess. Just the the machinery of government, from the National Security Council to the State Department, how that is run. I mean, it's easy to roll your eyes at bureaucracy, and everyone does, but that's how things actually get done. And if that is not well managed and you don't have a clear line of command, things languish. Things sit or don't get changed when they should be changed. So, you know, he's got a long to-do list.
So I think it's not unreasonable to say that there exists a level of apathy among the younger generations in terms of knowledge about international affairs and current events. A lot of people, you know, especially our age in university, don't really seem to care all that much about things going on in the world. So what are some ways that the current administration, people in public service, can sort of rekindle an interest among younger generations in getting greater involvement and knowledge about what's going on outside of our own country's borders?
Well, I don't think that burden of responsibility is necessarily on the government. It has to come from students and from those that are going, wait a minute, there are things that are happening on the other side of the world that directly impact me, even here in Wisconsin, right? Whether it's the economy, whether it's internet with things. And of course, some people are drawn more to international, or at least exploring. I'm a big advocate. I was fortunate enough during my college years. I went to Penn State undergraduate. I did a college year abroad. Huge to open up your mind of, oh, there's, you know, people do things totally different here, but they seem to do it just fine. And those experiences, those possibilities, we don't have much of a tradition here in the United States, but the UK does, of having the gap year between high school and college, where many, not yet, you know, do study abroad, work abroad, working for nonprofits. There are so, particularly now, because what can you not find on your laptop through the internet, opportunities and so forth. I mean, I could go on a long rant and it would just be useless. I do think that our culture tends to be so insular, and we have, I mean, it comes from the educational system as well, that is not asking enough, is not expecting enough. And, you know, again, I don't want to rant and rave, but, you know, where you have reality TV, which really does deaden your mind. I mean, I enjoy watching The Housewives of whatever as much as anyone else, but it's, you know, like candy. It's like a little bit. You watch it and then you go do something that's really worthwhile. So these will be a cultural question, a societal question. Is this who we want to be? Is this who we've given up on the idea of any sort of, obviously we don't have the draft anymore. There's, you know, every so often there's this idea of national service and everyone goes, oh, really? I mean, when you have, we are a deeply polarized nation, and I think it's today and tomorrow will be a lot of debate on gun violence issues, gun control issues, and where you have extraordinary amounts of money flowing into the political system so that a minority or smaller voices or minorities have much larger voices because of the money that's attached to them. All I'm saying, that's a long answer to your question of why can't kids get more involved? But I mean, you have to look in the further context. And that's part of it. Incredible amount of money in the system, thanks to Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court. And you know, my personal view, I know I'm in Wisconsin, a big hunting state, but I'm betting that real hunters here are going, you know, I think background checks and limited magazines are kind of make sense. But you don't hear that. Apparently 90% of Americans are like, no, that makes sense, really. And yet in Congress, they're like, oh, no, we can't do, you know, I can't, there's no way that's going to pass.
They get shouted down by the minority, by the vocal
Precisely.
minority. And
Precisely.
they're intimidated.
Mm-hmm. So, you know,
We're at a point where we really need to
wrap up?
close.
Oh, okay.
So if there's one, you haven't asked a question. Did you want to ask a question?
No, sorry.
Okay.
Does anybody
One more
else?
question?
Otherwise, I have a question. Anybody else?
What do you think, did they call for break practice? I mean, what do you think of the draft? I wasn't drafted, I enlisted, but my number was 2.
Does anybody
One more
else?
question?
Otherwise, I have a question. Anybody else?
What do you think, did they call for break practice? I mean, what do you think of the draft? I wasn't drafted, I enlisted, but my number was 2.
Okay, so here's what I think of the draft.
I mean, just out of,
1% of Americans, less than 1% of the Americans, take 100% of the bullets. And the rest of us are told to go shopping to support our economy. I'm not, I got a lot of other things, I'm not ready to, go out and campaign for the draft, but something is fundamentally flawed. I don't know how many students here have ever considered a career in the military, or that, small? I don't know, do you have an ROTC?
There's a veterans club.
yeah.
Is there a
great
veterans club? Yeah.
club.
Yeah, so I think there's a deep disparity, and if you go to in a so-called elite, Ivy League campus, those that do join the military are really sort of like, what are you doing? Why would you do that? There are some deep inequities in our society, and that would be one of them. Good? You didn't have one more question?
No, I'm
You're
good.
No, it's
You're good?
Nope.
Okay.
There's Q&A at the front.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Oh, my
Yeah,
pleasure.
thank you.
Thank you.